Today I'm going to finish off taking a look at the VU meters or power meters that I bought from eBay over the last couple of years or so. We'll start off with this one. It's got a nice large display on the front. I'll put a cassette next to it so you can compare the size. So yeah, those are quite large dials on there. This is the latest one from a chap in Lithuania who made this model, which I featured a couple of years ago, and this analog one is his latest creation. Very nice and neat it is too. We'll take a look around the back. From the left to the right, we've got the RCA stereo line level inputs. The dial in the middle controls the backlight brightness, power input, and an on-off switch on the right-hand side. So I'll put some audio into this from the YouTube audio library and we'll have a look at it. You can leave the lights off completely if you prefer, or adjust them to whatever brightness suits. Now, whilst it's an attractive device, it isn't just an ornament, it is a useful piece of equipment, and you can even adjust the potentiometers on the inside to match your setup, or get in touch with the manufacturer and get him to customise one of these for you. But that's about all I can tell you. I mean, everything is on screen. It's a stereo VU meter. You put your audio in the back and the needles bounce around. So let's have a look on the inside. Plastic case on this one seems quite deep. I don't know if they could have made it a little bit shallower and still fitted the same things in. I think they could once you have a look inside here. You'll see it's very nice and neat though. Power board on the left hand side, which is multi-voltage, so you just put your own figure of 8 lead in the back of that. It doesn't matter what voltage you're on. Right hand side, we've got the driver board for those meters. Now you can buy that separately. If you want to put one of these together yourself, you can go on his web store on eBay. I'll put a link to that in the video description text box. Buy one of those, add your own VU meters, your own power board, your wires and your case, and put something together yourself. I'm the kind of person that would rather buy something like this ready-made that someone's done a much better and neater job of than I could do. But it's entirely down to you. If you do want to buy a ready-made one, they're not entirely cheap. £120 plus £15 postage from Lithuania to the UK. But you can see he's sold plenty of these, so there are quite a few people out there that just like to buy a ready-made component that looks really smart. Okay, let's keep this thing moving along. Let's have a look at this next one. I bought this in June 18. I didn't realise I'd had it that long. It's been sat in the box since then. So let's put it together. On the left-hand side here, we'll start off with a 3.5mm mini jack lead and a splitter for the end of there. It's powered by USB, so runs on 5 volts, but that's got a little barrel plug on the end of that lead. And then we've got the spacers and screws, because the vacuum fluorescent display is held between these two pieces of acrylic, which have currently got a protective coating on them that you peel off. But those go on either side of this display. On the right hand side of here, we've got 3 buttons which control the various functions, as well as set the time and date on the clock. On the left hand side, we've got the 3.5mm mini jack input, as well as the barrel plug power socket. And I have to say, from my layperson's point of view, this seems to be very professionally constructed. There's no kind of flex in the board or any of that nonsense. So all we need to do now is to put the perspex sheets on either side, which act as a bit of a protection and also a stand for the device. Notice there are holes cut out in this though. Those are at strategic points which line up with pin outs or ins on the back of the board. So rather than having to reach in and press the buttons on the board itself and plug the wires into the side of it, you could build this into another component. So for example, if you decided to build your own amplifier, you could have this on the front of it, so it's an amplifier with a built-in spectrum analyzer. Very neat, and I'm assuming that's where these things originate from. I can't imagine they were designed to be sold separately like this. Now, the last time I peeled a protective film off like this, in the comments under the video, I got quite a few people saying, "Peel it slower." There's some weird fetishes out there. Anyway, with this one, make sure you don't get any fingerprints on the inside of the acrylic when you sandwich the whole thing together. So just a screw in each corner, put the power in the side, and it will come on straight away. The display is going to look dim on camera. That's because of the studio lights I've got in here, which are really quite bright, but also the clock display is dimmer than the spectrum analyzer display. And it looks fine to the eye normally. It's just with really bright lights on it, it's quite hard to make out. The first thing I want to test though is whether or not the display is reacting to the sound that's coming into it properly. So we've got 25 bars here, and when I play this logarithmic scale sine wave, which goes from a low note up to a high note, you can see the bars move from the left to the right, as they should do. I mention this because there are some devices which just use these bars for show and will just flash them in time with the beat, but they won't equate them to the pitch. So now I can move on and set the time and date, which display on the device whenever there's no audio coming through to it. You can also manually swap between the two displays by pressing the button in the middle, and pressing it again turns on this red line across the bottom. So playing audio into it now, you'll see the display goes brighter, and this first display we've got has peaks at the top and bars beneath. You've got a few different options you can choose between. You could just have the peaks on their own without the bars underneath, or you could have the peaks and bars but the peaks are flying off the top of the screen, or you can just have the bars on their own. So you could use this as a desk clock if you wanted, although it does look a little bit ugly with those wires sticking out of the side, but whenever you play audio through it you get a nice Spectrum Analyser type display. Now on the last video a few people said, well, the Spectrum Analyser is no use because you can't see the individual frequency numbers, they're not listed next to it. I don't really think it's that kind of device. Just like the last one, this is really just something that's more for show. I think it would look better though built into the front of a machine, and maybe then you could put the frequency numbers underneath if you put a decal around the outside of it. I can't complain about the price though, it's about £33 delivered to the UK. If you're interested, you'll find affiliated links in the video description text box where you'll also find the prices for other countries. Now just a quick aside, you might remember the Loudness time device I used to display subscriber numbers as well as tell me the time and the weather and a few other things as well. I have it in the background of some of the videos, there'll be a link at the top of the screen to a full review. Well, after the last video about VU meters and spectrum analyzers and things, somebody asked, there's one on here, and they wanted to know, does it display the spectrum properly, or is it one of these ones with the random jumping bars? So I thought, well, we'll find out. I'll play the sine wave test into this and we'll see what happens. And sure enough, it does move from the left to the right. The only issue with having a spectrum analyzer display on this one when it's being used as a Bluetooth speaker is the fact that that display doesn't remain on there. It just jumps back to the time after a set amount of seconds. But at least now we know that when it does display, it's accurate. Right, now let's move on to an Emmy award-winning sound meter. This one got an outstanding achievement in engineering development. It's Michael Dorrough's Dorrough Loudness monitor. Since its introduction, this has gone on to become an industry standard which is still in use today. On the left you'll see it says underneath normal persistence range, on the right normal peak range. What we've got here are 2 meters in one. I'll read the blurb because I'm not going to be the best at describing it without this. The patented Dorrough ballistic is based on the immutable mathematics intrinsic to audio waveforms. Their average indicates amplitudes in the context of time for a true reading of audio power that satisfies both ear and machine. At the same time, users are provided with an unfettered real-time peak, so nimble as to be able to pick up destructive burst anomalies the ear might miss, but are all too noticeable to recording devices. The mathematical cohesion between peak and average also provides users with a unique window into qualitative aspects of the sounds they are recording. By observing the relationship between the peak and average displays, the user can observe graphically the effects of processing, compression, and even detect distortion. Okay, so this is all way above my pay grade. I'm not a recording engineer and I'm not even going to pretend that I know about this subject. But from what I can glean, the idea is, and I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't just want to be paying attention to the peak when you're setting your recording levels, because you could find that overall volume, the loudness, is too quiet. However, if you set your volume just for your overall loudness, you also want to keep an eye on the peaks in case they go a little bit too high. So this meter lets you look at both things at once. At least I think that's how it works. The one thing that I am confident in though is that it sure is pretty. That Academy Award I mentioned was handed out to the Dorrough meter in the year 2000, but Dorrough had been making them for years before then, and they're still manufacturing them to this day. You can go and buy a brand new Model 40 like the one I've got for $475, or if you don't mind going virtual, you can get a plug-in for $129. But for me, nothing can match up to the real thing. Now the meters are built into all sorts of cabinets and rack mounts and things. This one has got 2 XLRs on the back and various other inputs and dip switches, of which I don't know the purpose, but it doesn't really matter. You can see on the bottom here we've got a big Velcro pad. This would have been stuck on top of a console at some point. So we'll unscrew the box, have a look inside. The two halves are held together with a couple of ribbon cables, so I'll just remove those so you can get a bit of a closer look. There's really not an awful lot to see in here, just a load of chips. You can see there's a date up there. I think that would be mine dates from 97, 46, 97 perhaps. I'm not too sure. We've got the power supply here as well. Not really an awful lot to show you. I'll just show you inside the front here. You can see that that's the display. If I flip it the other way around, you can make out a few little bits of information on there. And if we look down the side, we can see all the LEDs that are going to be lined up with the front. There's no moving parts in here at all, so very little that could go wrong with it, I'd imagine. I think these things will probably last for decades. And of course, all those chips are socketed as well. So if anything did go wrong with them and it was in a proper studio environment, they'd just be able to swap out the components that they needed to. If you're looking for one of these, well, either buy it new or go looking for second-hand ones on eBay, but they do tend to fetch quite high prices because, of course, they come out of studio environments. I was fortunate to get mine for just over $100. Now let's move on and look at something that's a lot more frivolous. Rather than being a piece of studio equipment, this is more akin to a sound-to-light toy. As you can see, it's quite flexible and delicate, but fortunately it was well packaged, so it arrived in one piece. My favourite feature of this one is that it's got a built-in microphone. Therefore, there's no need to wire it into any other components. You can just power it up and stick it on top of a speaker and it will do its thing. Apparently, it was originally a Kickstarter, although I didn't buy it from there. I just found it on eBay. So let's plug it in and see what it does. Pressing the single button on the 3D printed case will cycle between the various different display modes. I couldn't for the life of me tell you how many different displays there are, because after a while they all start to look rather similar to one another and you can't tell whether you've cycled around or you've ended up in a new one. But let's have a look at it in the dark. As you can see, it's relatively responsive to the beat of the music. It's not the kind of thing you're going to use to accurately measure recording levels. This is just an entertainment device, a toy, a kind of modern day music reacting lava lamp, the kind of thing that you might put on a shelf at a party. And because it uses a microphone, you don't need to wire it into the stereo. It's ready to go straight away. If you want to get hold of one of these, there'll be a link in the video description text box. So in this video, we've covered the serious as well as the frivolous. We've had a look at the retro style as well as the full spectrum. But in a world where most amplifiers now look more like this rather than this, it's nice to know that if you want, you can still add some aftermarket visuals to go along with your audio. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.